So what do you need to work tonight? If you're going to be participating in this, grab your laptop, go ahead and fire it up. I will be giving you a link to MongoDB Atlas momentarily. If you have Node.js loaded up in NPM, that's going to be great. If you have Docker, that's going to be awesome. What I forgot to put in this list is Visual Studio Code, but you probably already have that one. And then if you have a REST client like Postman, we'll be demonstrating a couple of the, we'll be exercising some of the APIs we write in JavaScript. So that's just sort of a tool of convenience to exercise these. Okay. So let's do this first. I'm going to paste this link into the chat, and if you all would go out there and grab or log in to Atlas and open up a free account. So let's do that. And I'm going to just sort of go a little slow here while everybody's grabbing that link. And what you'll do is, well, let's just do it together here. So you're going to do a start free. And then you don't really need to enter a name. You can be anonymous and put your Gmail or your Yahoo or Outlook account. And then if you agree to our privacy policies, you can get started here for free. Now, I would go on from here, but I'm already logged into my cluster. And so you fill out that information, and what it's going to do is it's going to provision a cluster for you. So you'll just choose the free option when you get in there. Well, I'll tell you what, let me just log out. Let me just do this with you guys. I don't know why it's complaining to me here. I already have an account, so it's not going to let me do this. So what you want to, oh, no, never mind. Okay, I think I was able to cheat it. So what you'll want to do is over here on the left where it says shared cluster, create a free cluster. And that's all you'll have to do. It'll take a few minutes to set that up. And Christina, if everybody were to, can we raise our hands in this to let people know when we're done? We don't have that ability here, do we? If everybody could just add something to the chat window, we've got about 60 people here. So if everybody can just say completed, done, something like that, just let us know that you've done that. That would be a great way to go on. And I'll wait for about 40 people. Okay, oh, good. Already got some people. Excellent, excellent.
John, people are raising their hands in the participants as well.
Okay, great. Okay. Okay, so I am going to continue with this. So the next thing, while you're in your cluster, let's come over here to your cluster, and you're going to see 3 buttons underneath the name you gave it. If you took the default name, it'll say, I think it says something like Project 0. What we want to do is double click this ellipsis here and load the sample data set. And if you have an Atlas account, just go ahead and load the sample data set into your account. So you'll just log in like you normally do. And we'll load the sample data set, because what we're going to be doing is we're going to use our sample mflix database. And specifically, it's going to be the movie database. So we're going to pick on that tonight. We're going to take a look at a little bit of the COVID data that's out there. We'll see what's going on in terms of the world of how Johns Hopkins is updating that information from World Health. And so we're going to take a look at a couple different databases as we get through the night. So if y'all could, you've got the cluster. Go ahead and give me a done in the chat window when you've got that data. Okay, yes, and Jing, the data will take, or the cluster could take a few minutes to stand up, so no worries, that's normal. Okay, so we're gonna load the sample data. If anybody has any questions, go ahead and throw those into the chat so I can see them, and I'll try to keep an eye on things here if you're having any problems. Okay, the next thing we're gonna do, and I'm gonna go and do a demo. No, it doesn't matter about AWS, Google, or Azure, your choice. It's gonna be pretty cloud agnostic, but the nice thing is about all the different regions we have is you can reduce the amount of latency in your queries. So pick a region that's close to you. That's probably the most important thing. Cloud provider doesn't mind. The big thing you want to do is make sure you're having a free cluster. Yeah, the data will take a few minutes to load. Okay, what do we got here? Screenshot. Yes, you're okay. That's perfect. Whoever sent this screenshot, BS.org, that is normal. Your cluster is being created. That's normal. Okay, so it'll take a few minutes for that. You'll see like a little dot going around the screen that indicates that it's busy. That's sort of our idea of a busy wait. So that lets you know with some user feedback that we're provisioning the cluster right now. So we just slammed this thing with 60 people firing up clusters. So we're going to keep it busy for a few minutes. So what I'm going to show you in the next demo is MongoDB Atlas is always on security. It's secure by default. So what we have to do is we have to allow ourselves in. Imagine that. Nobody's allowed in. That's the default security. So we have to whitelist ourselves. Now we have a couple different ways from the networking level to allow for secure access. The first one is by IP address that you would enter, your current IP address of your laptop. We can allow for VPC peering that, most of the major clouds, Azure, GCP, and AWS have the ability to peer to a VPC that your company would use. And then if you're on AWS, we also have private link that pretty much allows one-way access. It acts like a NAT gateway. It's very, very secure, and it makes security people very happy. So the important part about whitelisting tonight is that we're going to be accessing this from our laptop, and we'll be using the shell, our JavaScript driver, and MongoDB Compass. So we'll be using a couple of different tools as well as Visual Studio Code. So we'll definitely want to make sure we can access our cluster. So if you can't, this is going to be the first area to look at, and I'll show you how we get to that in the little demo here in a second. Okay, so what we're going to be working on tonight is MongoDB Atlas. This is our cloud data platform by MongoDB. Probably one of the best features about it is that it's self-service and elastic. And why is this good? Why is elasticity good for a cloud? Most of the time, we all have work to run on the cloud, but maybe we're only supporting a couple hundred users at a time. And then at certain times of the day, maybe it's off hours. We need to load up a lot of data. MongoDB will allow you to scale your platform dynamically to conform to that workload. So you could go from a very small instance that's costing your company a couple pennies an hour to run, to maybe one that's extremely powerful that may cost quite a few dollars to run an hour. But it allows you to scale up and scale down. And the other nice thing about it that kind of takes the whole admin guys out of the loop is you can do this on your own. You have the ability with this UI very simply to stand up a database, tear it back down. You can also use different tools like Terraform to do this. So if your company has a DevOps culture, we have providers that facilitate this type of infrastructure as code. As you all have already seen, we're very cloud agnostic. Based on the questions we had here, you can stand up your cloud on Google, on Azure, on AWS. So it doesn't matter. And the really cool thing about it is that if you come from an international company, we have the ability to set up global clusters. So we can have high availability clusters all across the world. And quite frankly, you can do this in the UI with just a couple mouse clicks. As I mentioned earlier, as we started talking about whitelisting, MongoDB Atlas is secure by default. And what this means is that when you first log into it, you can't even connect to into your own database. You have to allow yourself or whitelist your IP address to be able to do that. So we take security very seriously here. And then from like the day 2 operations side, we have a lot of monitoring built in. And we'll take a look at some of that when we walk through the UI. We have managed backup. And then we work quite well with mobile apps. So we bought a company called Realm. We have the ability to sync with Realm. And we also have a really cool serverless platform called Stitch that we're going to take a look at tonight. So the data layer of MongoDB Atlas is made up of MongoDB Server. So that is the heart of Atlas. Inside of the server, we have a Lucene-based full text search engine that allows for very sophisticated analyzers to do all kinds of different forms of text search. We also now have a data lake that allows for all kinds of free format type of documents that include JSON, varying formats of JSON, CSV, TSV, and the like, that can be basically aggregated and queried just like a Mongo database. We talked a little bit about our Realm services and our serverless Stitch capabilities. We have an incredible amount of drivers, and we'll take a look at the JavaScript driver tonight. I'm not going to be getting into charts. We have limited time, but we do have an incredible analytics capability in MongoDB Atlas that allows us to not only look at databases, but look at views as well as aggregations on views and databases. So it can get very sophisticated fast in how you want to analyze your data. Then what's important today is getting data in and out of the database. We have a lot of ways to connect to Mongo. We can query Mongo, which is a document model, and get SQL output using our BI connector. We can use Spark for machine learning and types of algorithms and streaming. Kafka also, we have Kafka Connect connectors that allow us to get data into Mongo as well as get data out of Mongo to Kafka topics. So all of these are available as transducers from your application to the database. And then finally, we support data on the edge. That's going to be our Realm application as well as Realm Web for web apps. And then finally, we have an IoT offering that will be coming very soon. So let's jump into Atlas real quick and take a look at how we would whitelist this. So I'm going to have to log back in. And this created my free cluster. And you all also have the ability within your account to enable two-factor authentication. I would suggest doing that. It's just good practice to get into doing that with everything these days, as important as security is for all of our information. Okay, so you will have a cluster, and yours will look a little bit different than this, but not too much. You'll have a single cluster if you chose to name it. If not, it's probably something like Project Zero. But what's important is you come over here to the network access, and here is where you're going to whitelist your applications. Let me delete mine, just to show you exactly how this goes. So it'll look like this. You'll add an IP address. You'll click Add Current IP Address. My laptop, if I can type. Okay, so now you will be able to connect from your laptop. Now, just one thing I wanted to point out here is that if you are managing a small network, you can add the CIDR block for your network, 192.168.20.0/16. It could be something like that. So you can add CIDR blocks. You can add individual IP addresses. As I said earlier, we also provide the ability for VPC peering. This works whether you're on AWS, GCP, or Azure. And then private endpoint is a feature of Amazon Web Services. So that was added by Amazon, I think, last fall, and we added it to our offering very early in the year. So this gives you an added degree of security if you are working on AWS. Now, the other thing you'll want to be able to do is you'll want to create a user for your database over here. So while we're here, let's everybody click Add New Database User. Okay, and what I suggest is just do the password version. You're not going to be able to use a certificate on the free version. Typically, this is just for M10 instances and up. Now we have the M0 instances, which are free. We have an M5. I think it gives you a little more memory and CPU. And then the paid for instances start at M10 and then go up to like, M1000s. They're very, very big. They have hundreds of CPUs and multiple gigs of RAM. So enter yourself a user. We're going to be using this when we log in on the shell. So just whatever it is you put in, just write it down. We're all talking and thinking about things, so just make a note of it somewhere. And that should set you up for success as we move on. Just to point out while I'm in the security area as well, if you choose to go further with MongoDB, we have the ability for auditing. We can encrypt the data. We can encrypt the data with default Mongo encryption. We can also add in encryption using AWS KMS, Azure Key Vault, or Google KMS. So it depends. We also work with LDAP, whether it's Active Directory or Open LDAP, and Kerberos as well. So we have a lot of capabilities for accessing and securing MongoDB and your data. So I hope everybody is okay. From this point in time, I'm going to go back to the slides. So the next part, what we're going to do is we are going to download MongoDB Compass. So let me just copy this. Let me copy this URL to the chat. Just a quick check here. Is the pace okay for everybody? Too fast, too slow, about right? If you guys could, okay. All right, excellent. Thank you. Thank you for the feedback. Okay, great. It's kind of hard to tell here. This whole remote thing, you can't look at people and you can't see people scratching their heads or anything like that. So it's kind of hard. Thanks, great. Thanks, everybody. Okay, super. So if I'm going to give you a few seconds to download Compass, what you're going to do is just go out there. You're going to come over here to your platforms. If you're on a Windows machine, God bless you. If you're on a Mac, you'll download a DMG and just go ahead and drag that sucker over to your applications folder or down to your toolbar as well for convenience. And in a minute, I'm going to walk you through Compass, but just kind of give you some time here. And I am going to jump into Compass, guys. So the first thing we want to do when we get to Compass is not worry about Compass. We want to worry about our cluster. So in MongoDB Atlas, we give you the ability to connect to your database many different ways. Remember earlier that I talked about the BI tool. Okay, we have the ability to connect via a SQL tool to MongoDB and query our data in SQL. I'm not doing that tonight. I want to focus on the JavaScript stuff. But what we are going to jump into is later on, we will connect with the shell. We'll use the application. I'll show you about the application connection strings that I've used. There's some really cool features in the Mongo driver that just completely eliminate a lot of technical debt that you would have to write for working in a distributed environment. And then for MongoDB Compass, we're going to come in here. You're gonna basically say, I have Compass. You've already downloaded it, so all you're going to do here is copy this connection string. Okay, that's it. You're done. You can close this, and what we're going to do is open up Compass.
Hey, John, we're having a couple of questions come through the chat.
Oh, I'm sorry. I am not. Yes, you can connect through Studio 3T. That's your choice. I'm getting a problem with opening Compass. Can you allow Dana to talk, Christina?
Yeah, I'll allow it. 1 second. And then someone also asked, does it matter what version, John?
No, the later version is always better, but you know, no, it doesn't matter. Dana, what are you seeing?
Hi, I'm named now. Yeah, it's telling me MongoDB Compass cannot be opened because Apple cannot check it for malicious software. Software needs to be updated. Contact the developer for more information.
Yeah. Okay, so what you got to do is, let's see, security. No, that's not it. I think it's this one.
System preferences, huh?
No, well, yeah, you go to system preferences, but I think it's security, and no, this isn't general. Okay, so what you're going to do is in security and privacy under general, allow apps downloaded from anywhere. That's probably, you probably have something like App Store or App Store and identified developers right now.
Oh, it's downloaded. And I installed it, but it won't let me open it.
Right. And what I'm saying is go to your system preferences.
I'm in here.
And security and privacy.
Security and privacy. Let's see. That's not security. Security.
Yeah, let me get back here. It looks like the little house with a safe on it.
Oh, I found it. Sorry.
Yeah, I know. Like when you're flustered, you can never find stuff. You know, it's. I'm the same way.
First, it didn't come up for some reason. All right. Okay. Security and privacy here.
So click the lock. You put in your password, and then change that to anywhere.
Oh, actually.
I'll just add that Apple got a little bit more strict over some of their last updates. So a lot of times when you try to install software, especially newer stuff, if it's not in the App Store, if it's not following Apple's like identified developer list or whatever, then they're going to block it. So That's the same thing that's going on with Zoom too, right? A lot of people have to actually set up their Zoom and allow Apple to, or if they allow their Mac to record their screen or use the mic. So you have to make sure you change all that.
So what am I changing here in security and privacy now that I've unlocked?
Okay, so allow apps downloaded from, and then click the radio button that says anywhere.
App Store and identified developers, or okay.
Just do anywhere. That just for, and you can change it back later, but for now, just make it wide open. That way, we won't have any problems.
So it actually no longer has that option.
Okay, John, I can if you want, you can reach out to me. I will message you and I'll show you how to get through this. But John, you can carry on.
It does tell me right now that I can click on open anyways from MongoDB Compass. I guess it detected it. All right. Opening it.
Thanks, Sierra.
All right, it's working.
You got it? Okay, perfect. All right, Sherry, just with you. Okay, so before you get to the general tab, as Sierra said, you're going to click on security and privacy in system preferences. It's this thing that looks like a house. I don't know if yours is exactly organized like mine. I just had the fun of installing Catalina, like Vijay said, and have been having to authorize everything. So once you get in here, you have these 4 tabs at the top: privacy, firewall, file vault, and general. General is the one you want to click. Like sometimes you might be on another tab. So just click on general, unlock this, and then allow apps downloaded from anywhere. Really? Vijay, do you have Catalina? That's what I have, and I have anywhere in here.
I have also Catalina too, so I'm not sure why some people are saying that. They may actually be like on an older version, but yeah. If anything though, if you're having issues with, a lot of like the setup, we can help you as a group afterwards too.
Yeah.
And just get you through those issues. So feel free to definitely just reach out to me. I will walk you through. I've done this like plenty of times. So I actually feel like focus more on like the learning part than like the, the the difficult like, debugging part sometimes.
Yeah. Hey, Christina, if you could put Sherry in Vijay's room afterwards and Dana in mine, we'll have a little time to go over this.
Yeah, we'll go over in the breakout rooms for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So what I want to do here is, you're not going to start off this way. You're going to start off in this very disconnected state here. I've obviously used Compass before, so I have lots of previous connections over here. But what you're going to do is you're going to see this new connection. So the best thing to do is just click in this box and paste your connection string in there. And in my case, I am going to just click my demo store in there. And then if you want to, you can click over here. You can click back and forth between filling connection fields individually. And then you can just enter your password. Okay, so once you have that information in, MongoDB can authenticate against any authentication database, but by default, we use a database called admin. So in a standard Atlas configuration, you'll always be authenticating against the admin database. You can change this later. It's something that you're not beholden to, and we allow you to do an awful lot of different things with security here, but by default, the admin database is where you want to go. So we're going to connect to this. And over here, we are going to connect to this client database, okay? And what I want you to see over here is that I've already created this database, and you'll notice in the GitHub repo, there is a directory called Compass Demo. And in the Compass Demo directory, there's a file in there that says Compass Script. So at the very top of that, if you want to click into this, hold on a second. Let me bring this over here. I don't want to have too much cluttering things up.
John, we're having a few people ask how they can get the connection string and the connection link.
Okay. Let me go back to that. Okay, so you're going to come back here to your Atlas cluster. All right, and what you'll see is make sure you click on clusters over here on the left. So if you were down here in network, it might look like this, but you want to click on clusters. And then over here under clusters, you want to click on connect. And then from here, we're going to connect using MongoDB Compass. So you can click on the side that says, I have MongoDB Compass. We already downloaded it. And all you're going to do is click this copy for the connection string right here. Okay, so hopefully everybody's got that. And then we will come over here. Let me disconnect again. We'll click on the paste connection string. You're just going to paste your connection string right in there. Once you've pasted the connection string in there, you'll be able to come over here to your recents and just click on it. So it has a nice handy way of keeping track of databases you've connected to in the last certain period of time, however long that list is. So you just click connect. And you won't see all of this. You'll see admin, I think local, and I think it's mostly just admin and local you'll see right now. If you've loaded the sample databases, you'll see the sample Airbnb, sample geospatial, sample Inflix. Can you discuss connection string format, SRV, or standard for a minute? Yes. Okay. So yeah, that's a good point. We have a couple of different ways to connect to MongoDB. The first one does use SRV records. So what we allow for is, and what this does is this creates a seed list. And this allows the drivers or Compass to connect to the primary in the replica set. So this is one way that we added back around Mongo 3.6. The older way, to connect is using, this method here, where as opposed to having the SRV record, what you do is you actually add all of the servers on the command line. Now, this is what you'll use for most of the drivers. In addition to having all of the IP addresses and ports for your replica set, you have SSL options. You'll specify the name of the replica set, the name of the authorization database, and then this feature, retry writes, which is a feature in the driver that if a write fails, the driver will automatically retry it before it throws an exception. And then this other part called write majority, I'll explain that a little bit later. But this is two different ways that you can connect to MongoDB. Anybody getting this kind of error, invalid source, admin external? Okay, so what happened, Dana, is you chose the X509 method. The external database will go out to an external provider, whether it's an LDAP or something like that. So go back to your users. Let's go over here and make sure that when you add a new user, it is password, okay? Okay, and then make sure you give yourself the right types of privileges. And I'm going to make this a temporary user for 6 hours because it'll go away. So I called this user foo, and it's got a lifetime of 6 hours. So this way, if I choose to log in with foo, I will not have to provide an X509 certificate. So that's probably what happened, Dana, was that the user was specified X509 as opposed to password, username, password. Okay. All right. Let's see. All right. No more questions. So let's get into the demo. So back to our database. So what I did here was I used this tool called mgenerate. And what mgenerate did was create 5 million records of random data. And what you have in that directory is a template of that information. What it allows you to do is just create mock data. I mean, it's really good. It keeps you out of trouble from the development and QA standpoint. You can create any type of cardinality you want. I mean, you can have 5 records or you can have 50 million. It just depends on what your needs are and the cardinality that your microservice is going to have to support. So what you'll do is you'll create this. Now, I'm going to tell you something. This took about 20 minutes to create 5 million records. At least on this Mac, it did. And then what I did was I used the Mongo import tool. Now, you could go back to that JavaScript container, or we haven't gotten to Docker yet. So I will show you this in the Docker container, but part of that deployment will have Mongo import in it. So when we download the Docker container to run Mongo shell, I will show you that Mongo import's in there. And then this has the import command. The only thing you're going to do is change the database to this line here. Now let me show you where that comes from, okay? Mongo also helps you out here as well. So we're going to come back to the clusters. We're going to click on our cluster name, and then over here on command line tools, we have the ability here to use our Mongo import and Mongo export. And what this does for us as a convenience is that it fills in the actual name of the servers for the cluster. Now, you may have to change the username. You'll definitely have to add the password, whatever name of database and collection. Now, a collection is analogous to a table in the relational world. The file type is going to be JSON, so that'll be JSON, and then whatever the name of the file name is. So all of your help is right here in MongoDB Atlas. So we have data pulled in here. When I generated this, all I did was something like this, JSLA.json. And you just kind of wait for it to get done. Okay, so if you're generating 5,000 records, it doesn't take long. If you're generating 5 million, it takes a long time. So what I want to do now is show you the capabilities of Compass. So first off, as a browser, okay, so we have this information, and we are going to browse our database and take a look at the information for our customers. Let me grab Compass.
Hey, John, are you able to pause for a second? It looks like Sierra's having some trouble in the chat.
Okay.
If you want me to unmute her, I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, Sierra, you can speak.
I was having trouble accessing the sample data in Compass.
Okay, did you, okay, so let's go back here, Sierra. Let's go back to the cluster. All right, so you see your cluster here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you did the load sample data set?
Yes.
Okay, so let's click on the collections button together.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see something like you're seeing on the screen now, retrieving a list of databases and collections?
Oh, I see it. I see it all on Atlas. I just don't see it in Compass.
Oh, okay, gotcha. All right. So maybe it's just a matter of logging in. Were you able to get your connection string okay?
Mhm.
Okay. Alrighty. And let's go back over here. I'm going to disconnect. Okay, so you see something like this for new connection?
I'll disconnect, but I was, yes, I do.
Okay. And you paste your connection string in there. So if you do the fill connection fields in separately, you see something like I have. Obviously, the host name is different, and your username is different.
Right.
Okay. And then you click connect.
Got it. Thank you.
Good. All right. I know sometimes my mouse just doesn't click right and it drives me nuts. Okay, super. Thank you. All right. So we're going to look at clients. And right here, we can take a look at this database. And right now, we only have one index on here. And I'll point out what that index is for. The document size is 6 gigabytes. And we compress it down at, pretty small. But it's still an impressive amount of data. So what I've got here is, remember I told you I had one index. By default, MongoDB always creates an ID field, and it creates this GUID here for your ID field. Now, by default, we have an index on the ID field, okay? So that is always your default index. And now what we can do is we can formulate queries. And I don't want to do a little simple query. I want to do something a little challenging. So what I want to do is have multiple conditions. So in this particular case, what I've came up with is a scenario that I want to look at my life insurance policy holders in the state of Utah that have been underwritten as smokers that were born between January 1st, 1990 and December 12th, 1990. You don't have to remember all this, it's all written down. And of course, I'm looking for the ladies only, okay? So with this query right now, I can come out here and query the database. 5 million records, not going to be super fast, but not too slow. So I came up with some results. And what I could do with this is go, you know, this really stinks. This is slow, especially if somebody in a call center is doing something like this. So Mongo obviously allows for the ability to add indexes. All right, and this is exactly what we're going to do. But let's take a look at how long this query actually took. So we can implement what's called an explain plan. And this is not a foreign subject if you work with relational databases. This type of utility exists in the relational world as well. I know in my day when I was doing database work, it was called Toad. So that was the tool of choice for working with relational databases. So I don't know if this button clicked. Here we go. So basically what's happening here is I have a very slow query. It took just about 7.5 seconds to run. It examined all 5 million documents to return back 312, okay? That's not good, okay? I mean, not only is it not good that it took 7.5 seconds, but you know, it just had to go through the whole database. And this is what we call in the document world a collection scan, okay? We don't have tables, we have collections. So in this particular case, it had to go through all of this particular collection for clients. Now what I can do is speed this up, all right? I can add an index. And Mongo allows a very rich array of offerings for indexes. I can have unique indexes. I can have time to live indexes. So let's say we're pulling in data, you know, that we only look at maybe a week at a time. I can put an index on that And when that index expires, I can put an expires on this thing. And when that expires, Mongo will go clean up all the data. We don't have to run another ETL job to clean up the mess. We can have partial filter expressions. We can use collations. You can have a custom collation. And then in terms of wildcard projections, what that means is that with documents, a document can have a document, can have a document, can have an array, can have a document. It's very recursive. And what we can do is create wildcards that allows for pretty much wildcarding into, like, say, maybe that array of documents. So what that's good for is as you're starting to figure out how people are using your data, you can index this. Now, with all indexes comes a penalty on write. The gains for indexes are on reads. So what we want to do is be very strategic about how we create our indexes. But there's an awful lot of capability in MongoDB that allows us to help us understand our data. Maybe the wildcard is the right thing. I like to think of wildcards as a first step in optimization towards, you know, the ideal index. So it's not a destination. It's a stop on the journey, as I like to think about it. So I'm going to create this test index, and what I'm going to do here is I've got my query down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add state, and I'm going to make that ascending. I can add insured. Policies, insured persons, okay. And that. And then I'm going to add gender. And I'm going to add, oh yeah, okay, date of birth. Now, one of the things that, you know, if you go through the, one other thing I wanted to point out too. Now, when I click create index, this is going to build this index in the foreground. This is okay and cool if you're in a development or staging environment. But if you're in a production environment, you definitely want to build this in the background. Now, for all of these GUI options that we have in Compass, there are command line counterparts as well. So we build indexes on the collection level. So I'm going to build this in the foreground. So this will take a little bit of time to build because it's going through the whole database, and what it's doing is creating the actual index entries. Now, what Mongo does, and the power in our combined indexes like this, is Mongo uses something called prefixing. So it can use portions of the index to access the data. So for example, if I had a query with state and is this person a smoker, it can use that, or state, is this person a smoker, and gender. It can use that as an index prefix, okay? So you don't have to have 5 different indexes for this particular piece of data. One will cover it with index prefixing. Yeah, so let me show, I'll go back to the find command and show you the equivalent with our find command. So what our documents browser is doing is very similar to the select, and let me just go back here and show you. So what I'm doing is select gender, date of birth, state, policy type, and insured.smoking. And then I would, you know, obviously, since that would be a relational, I would have to say from, and then I would have to apply all these conditions, right? So from all the tables, where gender equals female, date of birth is between these dates, where state equals Utah. And in the case of Mongo, that you can't do with relational databases, is I can go into arrays. So what I'm doing here with my policies array is I am looking to see, is this a, and of course I'm not, okay, is this a life insurance policy? And is the insured person a smoker? In this particular case, it's true. All right. The only thing is here, and they're a female, so this record would have been selected. So, yeah. So I've got everything here. So that's kind of how the find command works versus a select. So now that I've added this index, what I want to do is go back and see how performant this index is. So here I was at 7.5 seconds on 5 million records. Let's see what happens with the index. Okay, so now I went from 7.5 seconds to 1 millisecond. Okay, so why did this only take 1 millisecond? It's because I'm using my index. Okay, so I was able to walk my index and fetch back the 312 records that were necessary to satisfy this query. Okay, now there's one other cool feature here that we can do with our data is we can add validations. So what I want to do is show you a sample validation. And in this case, since I only have ladies selected, okay, this document passed. Everything is fine. Okay. Now, in the case of this sample here, I'm going to mess this up and make this lowercase. So if somebody mistyped something, this is going to pass. Oh, I'm sorry. So let's do this over here. Let's make the F lowercase. And I am like mystified as to, okay, so in this case, if I make this uppercase, now my document passes. And I don't know what this thing is doing. This tool is acting weird. Maybe we have a bug in this thing. But what I should see when I change this is the mail document with the lowercase should have shown over here, and I'm going to have to report this as a bug. We just released this version of Compass the other day, so definitely have a bug here. Now, one of the other powers of our tool is the ability to create aggregations. All right, and what aggregations are a sequence of stages. So the output of this overall select star up here at the top is input into this first stage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disconnect from this database, and I'm going to connect to our COVID database. And we are going to connect to the COVID-19 global and US. And one of the things we can do here is, I'm not going to sit here and torture you with my horrible typing skills. And what I did was I already created an aggregation pipeline. So I am just going to paste that in here. And this tool allows you to share aggregations between your development team. So one person may have created this and have this in GitHub for others to share. And in this particular case, I'm just going to cut and paste this out of my editor. So what I'm interested in seeing is I'm interested in seeing by country the number of confirmed cases, the number of people that died, and the number of people that recovered. Now, if you go back here, what we did was in this particular database, it's just called confirmed, deaths, and recovered. What I can do with this is I can change the names. So this makes it a lot more user-friendly to people looking at your data. They could be using MongoDB charts to look at this information. So obviously changing these names for the legends is going to make this data more readable. So we allow you to do that in numerous places here in the aggregation framework. The next thing I want to do is I want to sort it from highest to lowest. Now, I get this from a lot of the predetermined functions that we have here in the aggregation framework. We have over 40 of these in here. And in this particular case, I am going to just choose the sort. And with the -1, it's going to be a descending sort. So I want to go from the number of countries that have the highest number of deaths to the lowest. And we can change this in a minute. We'll change this around and have a little fun with this. And then what I can do is I can limit this to 10. So I only want to look at the top 10. So as of today, we can see that Europe is still taking the brutal punch of this with China and the US, followed by Iran, Belgium, Brazil. I don't remember Brazil being in there. And then finally Germany. So Brazil snuck in there. Now, we can change the sense of this sort. So in this case, we can take the country with the lowest ones, okay? And I guess we all should have been in Fiji or in the Caribbean at St. Lucia because it's been pretty good there. If you got it, everybody recovered. So it's kind of interesting to see that there's a lot of places around the world that nobody died. So looks like Africa, the Caribbean, and Fiji are there. So anyway, this is just showing the capabilities of our aggregation framework. Now, another cool thing about this is that, you know, not everybody just runs the Mongo shell in production. They're using different language drivers. So what this Compass tool allows us to do is export this aggregation in many different languages. So over here in my pipeline, this can be used. This is ready to go for Mongo shell. But if I'm using Python, if I'm using Java, I can add my import statements here. You know, if we got C# developers over there, you know, we can add BSON documents, Node.js, since this is JavaScript. This goes right into an aggregate function in the JavaScript SDK. So you can copy this right out of here and drop it right into your code and you're ready to go. And you don't have to worry about getting all of your quotes and semicolons and squiggly brackets and parentheses right. It takes care of all this for you. Okay, so that is Compass in a nutshell. So let's go back to our slides. So the next tool I want to talk about is MongoDB for Visual Studio Code. This was just recently released. So if you're familiar with Visual Studio Code, you're going to come over here where the 1 is to your extensions. And it's going to take you out to the extension marketplace. And then all you'll have to do is at the top, type in MongoDB. And what you'll get is the MongoDB for VS Code. In this particular case, it came right to the top. And where the number 2 was, there used to be a little green install there. So you're just going to click install and drop that into Visual Studio Code. And you are ready to connect to MongoDB from Visual Studio Code. So one of the cool capabilities, and I'll show you this, when you click on this ellipsis here, where the number 1's pointing to, it allows you to connect to different databases, but it also allows you to create what these are called playgrounds. And these playgrounds allow you to run predefined JavaScript. So in this particular case, I'm gonna show this in a demo in just a minute. I'm gonna run a playground here in VS Code just to show you how this works against my demo store database. And I'm creating a whole new database called JavaScriptLA and inserting some data in there. And then below this, I'll be running an aggregation. So here is how you connect to it. It's pretty similar to what you had to type in for Compass. You've got to put in the host name, your authentication, which you're going to want password, your replica set name, Your read preference is always going to be primary. I mean, you can have secondary, but just leave it for primary tonight. And then once you learn about the nuances of Mongo, you can start making changes like this. And then finally, on the Mac, Command-Shift-P will launch this, this launch bar up here. And what you can do is from here, you can completely launch your own Mongo shell. So down here in the terminal window, you can run a Mongo shell right here. And that's what we're going to do to experiment a little bit with MongoDB. So let's jump in here and take a look at Visual Studio Code. So I have already loaded Visual Studio Code. So what's going to happen after you go through that sequence of adding the extension, you're just going to come over here, MongoDB, and then you'll add it, right? So I already have mine in here. So what it'll do is it'll put this little leaf over here. And this leaf, I don't want to save this, will allow me to connect. Now, what'll happen the first time is you're going to want to add a MongoDB connection with connection string, okay? So what that'll do is you'll basically take what we had in the connect to Compass and put it in right up here, okay? So this exact same type of connection string that you get from your connect option for connecting to Compass. So over here, I already have that. I'm going to connect to MongoDB. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and what the playground does is create these .mongodb extension files. So when I click on this, this is going to load this into Visual Studio Code. And what it's going to do is this views, the way MongoDB works, is if there isn't a database named JavaScriptLA, and I'm going to change the name of this to JavaScriptLA demo, because I may not have deleted the one I had when I was testing this. I'm going to call it JavaScriptLA demo. It's going to drop the old version of it if it exists. And then what I'm going to do is an insert many. So this is a CRUD operation where we can add many different documents here. So every one of these between the curly braces is a document that we can add into MongoDB. So as opposed to letting Mongo assign the ID, you can also assign your own. The only caveat to that is that you have a function or a way of adding these IDs that's unique. This is a unique primary key. Then what we're going to do is a find. In this particular case, we're going to do a find on a date range. And then we're going to do the same thing down here using an aggregation. So I am going to run all this pretty much as JavaScript code here. And that's one of the cool things about the Mongo shell is that you can run any type of JavaScript code, and you can add things to your data, take things away from your data, cleanse your data. There's a million things you can do with JavaScript and the Mongo shell. And in this particular case, this is using Visual Studio Code's idea of a playground. Now, once you have your information and your program all together, and this could be a data load, this could be a data load with a cleanse, there's any number of things that this could be. You're going to look over here in the upper right-hand side, and you're going to see the run button. So it says run all from playground. So what this will do is this will say, are you sure you want to do this? Yes, I want to do this. So this is going to run this. And what it did was it created this output down here based on this aggregation. So what this aggregation says is find me all the information between January 1st, 2014 and January 1st, 2015. So I want everything from 2014. And then what I want to do is, based on the item, I want to sum for a total of price times quantity. So what I've got here is pretty much a sum of all of this, of my not a widgets, my little widget, and my giant widget. as the result of my aggregation. What I also wanted to show you is on the Mac, if you type Control-Shift-P, you'll see this Launch Mongo Shell come up, and just click on that. And what's going to happen is you are going to get a Mongo Shell prompt. So what we can do here is we can do a use. First, let me just show you something. So we can do a show DB. What happened? So let's do a use. Okay, so I have my sales collection here. So now what I want to do is I'm just going to run this find command here. Okay, and this is going to display my data. Now I have a lot of cool options that I can add to this to make it look nicer. I can add the pretty option. That's basically going to be like JQ output. So you'll see that it's going to pretty print the information, make it a little more readable, easy to digest. We also have the ability within the find command to, and this is going to be the one thing that we can also project information. So in this particular case, I want to project everything except the ID. So here I can do ID :0, right? And what did I do? I got it wrong. Oops, wrong place. So what this does, when I say ID :0, this says show me everything without the ID. I don't want to see the ID. Now, if I only want to see certain fields in here, I can add item, and I put a 1 there. If I don't want to see something, I put a 0 there. Just so I don't screw up the typing. Okay, so this is the way we project in MongoDB. So here, if we were to think about the relational world, I would do a select from, and I would list my item and quantity, then obviously from sales where, and then I would apply my range condition there. So this is the difference between a select and a find in the MongoDB query language. Okay, let's see. So we've definitely seen the shell. We have seen playgrounds. Those are the main features of the Visual Studio Code extension. And then we'll come back and we'll take a look at a few of the some of the code here. Let's keep going. 8:17, so we're doing fine on time. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the MongoDB shell. And I think the easiest way to do this is by using Docker. So what I'm going to suggest is that if hopefully you have Docker already installed, and I'm not introducing anything too new to you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste this into the chat window. paste up to here. Oh, wait a minute, the return didn't take. Oh. Okay. And I'm going to put a portion of the next command in there, the docker exec. And let's see. So let's just jump right in there to the shell. So here's what we're going to do here. Is we're going to create a new shell. And let me grab the command from the chat window. Now, for those of you that have the Docker extension, you could obviously optionally come over here and start the container as well. That would be up to you. I'm going to stick with this method for right now, since this is probably what most people have. So we're going to put our Docker run command here. And we can tell that it's running with a Docker PS. So in your particular case, you should be seeing a downloading message right now. It's going to be pulling all of this information from the Docker registry. That may take a minute or two, so I'm going to give you guys a minute to get that information downloaded. Then what we're going to do I don't need the sudo command. So what we're going to do now is we're going to execute the container on our command line. And the reason I'm doing that is that if you have, that's really weird with my background's doing. Let me turn on the light. Kind of looking like I was in a horror movie. Okay, so once we've got this downloaded, what we're going to do is we are going to actually execute into the Docker container, all right? And that's what the exec-it does. Now, how does Docker know how to execute a container? We're going to add the container ID. And from that, you need to tell it what you want it to execute. So in this particular case, we are going to ask it to run the bash shell. All right. So Docker execute -it -interactive, and I forget what the T stands for. Then we're going to add the container ID, and then that just tells Docker where to go to execute which container. And then once we have the container and how to execute it, we say, Docker, I want to run the bash shell. Okay, so that's what this is doing. What? I'm just going to do this as sudo. Maybe, I don't know, maybe the way I have permission set up on my Mac. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So if it doesn't work the first time you get some crazy error message like that, just run it as super user. Or if you are on a Windows machine, do a run as administrator. Okay. And that will solve your problems. So now we are in our Docker container. All right. So, I mean, you can see here, this thing uses Meteor. This is a pretty cool way to run Mongo. So this is not a waste of time. This is another cool way you can run Mongo if you need to run it locally for some databases. Now, what we need to do is connect to our Atlas cloud. So how do we do that? All right, we're going to go back to Atlas. And this time when we click connect, we are going to connect with the Mongo shell. So over here, I have the Mongo shell installed, and all we're going to do is click this connection string down here. And why does that do that? So all you have to simply do now is paste this into your Docker container where you're running bash. And in my case, my username and password, I just want to show you where this came from. So if I go over here to database access, you can see my username is me, John Dohoney, okay? I don't know, I forgot what password I typed in for foo, so I don't want to frustrate myself trying to figure that out. So I'm going to log into Atlas. I have to enter my password very slowly so I don't mess it up. And now I am connected to, so I can show my databases, and you can see that, you know, we created this JavaScriptLA demo. So I can do the use JavaScriptLA demo, and then I can do a show collections. And I can see that I have my sales collection, that I want to do a find, and I just want to look at everything in the database, okay? Bang. There's all the information that I put in up here from my playground, okay? Now, what I've done over here is I have some files that I called shell demo. So what I want to look at is just a couple of different ways that we can run JavaScript from the shell. Okay, so in this particular case, I'm going to use a different database. I'm going to use our sample mflix database. Okay, so I'm just going to be cutting and pasting this information in here. It tells me that it's switched to sample mflix. I can do a show collections. And what I'm interested in here is our movie database. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a find. But this time, as opposed to just displaying this information, I am going to assign this to a variable, okay? And this particular variable just so happens to be a cursor variable. Now, there's a lot of properties I have on cursors. One of these are going to be how many objects do I have in here? Now, if you take a look at this query, let me just move this up a little bit so you can see it a little bit better, and make the font a little bit bigger. That got a lot bigger, huh? Hopefully everybody can see that okay. So what I did was I limited to. So if I ask how many flicks are left in the batch, that answer seems right, okay? So I definitely have 2 in there. And now what I can do is I can use JavaScript looping here in the Mongo shell. So the whole lingua franca of MongoDB is based upon JavaScript, okay? Everything in MongoDB is pretty much based upon JavaScript. So we can write ES6 code in here to iterate using a MongoDB cursor. Now, there's other things where I'm going to show you in the next demo is we can write functions to enrich the data. We can make REST calls. There's any number of things we can do, you know, interactively with the shell. Now, more than likely, we're going to want to do this, you know, with React, or we're going to want to do this in a JavaScript driver. But you know, you may have a need to do this in the shell. So I just want to show you the power of JavaScript here in the MongoDB shell. So in this particular case, what I did was, and I made probably the font just a little too big, is I limited this to 2 records. And then what I'm going to do, I'm just going to Just change this to 1. You know, there's something funny about the command recall on this. But this will just show the 1 rating. So this is just going to show a single movie called, where's the title? Where'd it go? Windsor McKay. I've never heard of a movie like that. And then, you know, the interesting thing is this database has an awful lot of media in here. So it has links to the posters, which I'm going to show you with our React application. But to get back to this, we have the ability to also add functions, okay? So in this particular case, what I want to do is I want to add a zip code to this data. So I'm going to add some data. So let's just do this first. Let's do this on the safe side. Okay. Got that. And we get instant user feedback. Test database is gone. So here's the cool thing about Mongo. If I type use test, it creates the database right there. If it exists, it will move to that database. If it's not there, it creates it. So now what I want to do is I am going to create a collection called mock data. And I'm going to just insert this data in here. Oh. Okay, so all of our data has been inserted. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add some functions, all right? So I'm going to add a zip function, then I'm just going to generate this random zip code. And now I'm going to iterate through my data. And as you can see, what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to use the for each function and pass my document into my update function. And then what I'm going to do is for each ID, I'm going to set that to the result of my zip function call, okay? Now, let's take a look at our data again. And what this is going to do is the set function, if a field exists, it will change it, okay? If it's not, it will insert it. So now you can see we added a bunch of random zip codes. So pretty cool, right? So now I want to do the same thing here with area code. So you can use JavaScript to enrich your data. This could be a REST call. This could be taking an IP address, you know, and making a call out to a service that does IP to zip transformations, you know, for personalization. There's a lot of things we can do with our data. And then to show that I added these area codes, bang. So now I have enriched my data by adding zip codes and area codes. And I did this with JavaScript functions in our MongoDB shell. All right, let's go back here. Okay, so just to kind of go through some of the capabilities of MongoDB, we have the ability to work as documents. Documents simplifies the problem space because what we can do here is create logical groupings of information as we would think about it as humans. We no longer have to decompose information into tables as dictated by the relational model and the varying degrees of normalization to allow for a database that would be somewhat immune to data anomalies that could come along with the varying types of CRUD operations. Now, what is cool about MongoDB is with the document model, as I said, we can have subdocuments, okay? And if we need to, we can model our data as JSON. And a subdocument can also be modeled as tabular information. It could be modeled as key value. It could be modeled as geospatial information, or it could be modeled as a graph relationship, okay? So subdocuments are not limited to the single type of document that you start with. So many times with a relational database, you know, we typically tend to model data in tables or tabular, but we could also have, you know, a key value relationship in there. But the important thing is that when we stick with a model in a schema, we have to stick with it. Unlike the schemaless, we don't have to stick to a model. And even with, let's just say we had a model that, in this particular case, it may change its shape. You know, as we go to Europe, the addresses, you know, we have postal codes, we don't have zips. So the shape of the information can vary from one record to the next. The only thing that our code has to do is allow for that and be capable of handling those differences from one particular type of document type to a different one. So the database does not impose any limits on the program. The data model does not impose the type of data model you choose for a subdocument. So once again, you can have a document with subdocuments that could have different types of, you know, whether it's a graph model, a geospatial model, a tabular model, a key value model. It all depends on what your particular requirements demand. We allow for you to run your code anywhere in MongoDB, from local on your laptop, you know, to bare metal, private cloud, hybrid cloud, public cloud, and on our Atlas platform. When you run MongoDB, we allow for rich queries. You'll see down on the lower left-hand side, I had to move my mouse away. This thing was popping up here, so blocking it. But we can query the data as a point, as a range. You know, we saw range queries in our example from the data on dates, you know, where we're using two dates to, we can query geospatial, we can create buckets and use faceted searches. We saw a little bit about aggregations. We do have joins in MongoDB. We can use references. So like many times the object ID is used as a reference to reference information in another collection. So we have the ability to do joins, and we also have the ability to do graph traversals. So there's an awful lot of power in our query engines. Now, typically what these sit on top of are two primary data models. So if you look over here to the right, we have what's called the transactional analytic model. And what this allows us to do is have what we call a replica set, which is our first set of primary, secondary servers. So any type of cluster you create on Atlas will have at a minimum, as default, a primary, secondary configuration. Now what we do with this is that these typically get placed in different availability zones. So not only do you have high availability that you have 3 different virtual machines running your database, they're also somewhat immune to failures because of availability zones on all clouds are in different data centers. So they're physically separate. Now, the real power comes in with the replica set design is that we can add analytics servers. So without getting into a whole lot of detail about how this works, we can add these nodes, and these don't participate in leader election. So they can have different indexes on them than the primary cluster. So these can be specialized indexes. They can be specialized materialized views. There's be specialized views. There's many number of things that would support analytic processing. Now, the absolute cool thing is I call this my no ETL architecture, because you don't have to move data out of this cluster to do analytics on it. You can perform analytics on your operational data platform and not impact performance on writes at all, because these will be separate boxes working off separate indexes and with separate processors. So meanwhile, MongoDB is replicating this information in real time. So this data is very much up to date with what is happening on the primary. We would see this in our BI tools, with our charts tools. Tonight we use Compass, so if we were to connect to one of these secondaries, we'd be able to see it there. And using our BI connector, we can use tools like Tableau and Click to perform SQL queries against our document data. And then we can also hook up connectors like Spark and Kafka. We could use R and Python, as well as the MongoDB aggregations to process our information. Then if we need to partition information, so many times we get into compliance situations where partitioning makes an awful lot of sense. So let's say shard 1 is, and down here in each shard, we have our replica set from up here. So replica sets are an integral feature of our sharded clusters. And this gives us high availability as well as scale. It also allows us to isolate our workloads. So let's say, for example, shard 2 was in Europe, all right? So we have GDPR requirements in Europe. So I can, data that stays in Europe, it gets reported in Europe, right? It's not going to get reported here in the US or maybe over here on shard N, which might be Asia Pacific. So this type of infrastructure has some supporting actors. The first one is where you see these 3 dots. These are called config servers. And this keeps all of the information about these shards. Now, many moons ago, when we had to create a partition database with relational databases, these would be cross-reference servers. So you'd have to query the cross-reference servers before you could query, the database for the partition. So that was how that went. Now we've automated all of this. So your application makes the query through the driver. The Mongo S is our router. It has all the information about where to route the query, and it does some work to return the value back to the driver. So we can get into this in a lot more detail about high availability and partitioning. This can be deployed across a global scale. Imagine this architecture. Typically, it's deployed on a single region, but there's no reason why it can't be deployed across multiple regions. Remember I said MongoDB was cloud agnostic. So these can run on GCP, these can run on Azure, these can run on AWS. And at the end of this year, we are going to have a feature that will allow us to run cross-cloud. So you could literally have portions of your cluster in AWS and portions in GCP. So this would give you the ability to be somewhat immune to region failures as well as cloud provided failures. So pretty cool capabilities. And what it's going to do is it's going to maximize your cloud portability. It changes the way you think about things and how you approach a lot of problems, having this flexibility in your design. So as we think about documents, MongoDB was developed for developer productivity. We think MongoDB is the best way to work with data. And I hope by now that you've taken a look at the Mongo Shell, you've taken a look at Mongo Compass, and you'll agree, this is a pretty cool way to work with data. We've got JavaScript built in. And like I said, we've only just touched the tip of the iceberg. We're going to get a little deeper tonight. It allows you to put data where you need it. MongoDB can be deployed anywhere. and you can, like I said, you can put data where you need it and you can run it anywhere. So a lot of power in the hands of the developers. So most people come from the relational world. I know in my day we used to have these diagrams sitting right by this beast called a plotter and this tool called Irwin that printed these monsters out that pretty much gave you a headache the first time you looked at it until you really understood it. And what's amazing is you do learn to understand it. But the nice thing about MongoDB is it embraces the object model, object-oriented programming and objects. Now today, what we have to do object-oriented programming with a relational database is we have to map our objects to tables. So in comes the object relational layer. But with MongoDB, that does not exist. So the whole idea of having to maintain a schema and having to deal with the maintenance of object relational mapping is gone. Okay, so all those sprint tasks are no longer. You can basically model objects from your code to the database. And this is really how it should look. There should be a one-to-one correspondence between, the data model in your code and the data model in the database. So in thinking about the relational world and the MongoDB world, databases are still called databases. Now, a table in the relational world is called a collection. Parent-child tables we call nested subdocuments or arrays. Now, this is a recursive relationship, and just for right now, just think about nested documents. You can have arrays of nested documents. Like I said, it's recursive. Indexes are still called indexes. Rows in the relational world are documents. So just think about, when I was inserting that data, everything between the squiggly brackets was the document that I was inserting. That would be a row in a relational database. Columns are fields. Joins, we still have joins, but we call them a $lookup. We can use embedding and linking and use $lookup to pull them up, just like you would in the join. We have views in MongoDB. We have regular views and we have materialized views. So if you're an Oracle person, it's pretty much the same capability with a little extra goodness added. We'll get into that in another talk. And then I know a lot of people, in fact, the very first meetup I went to, it was a meetup where the guy was standing up in front of the room saying, that's one of the big problems with NoSQL databases is they don't have transactions. From day one, MongoDB has had transactions. Okay, we have this statement called find one and update. And what that does, and even back to MongoDB 1.0, we could apply a single document transaction. Now, where it gets interesting is when you have replica sets. And in version 4.0, we added the ability for multi-document transactions on replica sets. And then in 4.2, we added the ability for multi-document transactions on sharded clusters. Okay? So think about that one a little bit, what you have to do in terms of code to make that work across partitions. So MongoDB has handled all of this. So this just shows the contrasting data models, okay? Where the difference is that data here that's accessed together is stored together. So when we do a find on this, this is all pulled out with a single fetch. Imagine what you have to do here is you have to perform the join before you can even do the first fetch, all right? So big difference in terms of performance and disk I/O. The document model maps, as we talked about earlier, the objects in your code and objects to the database is a one-to-one correspondence. We can represent any type of data structure with all the flexibility we have with key value, with tabular, with JSON, with GeoJSON, graph. We can do anything. We can implement JSON schema at the collection level. JSON schema could optionally be implemented at the CRUD level where we're doing inserts and updates. So you can apply schema where it makes sense, not where it slows down productivity. It's in the hands of programmers to make sure that data quality is proper. Down into the bowels of Mongo, we use BSON. BSON is a very rich format. It's probably one of the shortest internet formats that you would ever read. But basically, there's over 20 different binary encoded JSON data types. And we have a lot of different drivers that can access this information. And this is just a sample of our drivers. So what I want to jump into now is our serverless platform. How am I doing on time? Good grief, I am running out of time. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Okay. You guys are all going to have the links to the Stitch and GraphQL resources and our driver resources here. So what I'm going to do is I am going to jump into Stitch. There we go. There it is. So what we have in MongoDB is a serverless platform. It's called Stitch. So if you're looking at your UI, you're going to click up here at the top. And we'll load up Stitch. And I created a Stitch project in here. And the first thing I have to do is add users in Stitch. So in this particular case, what I want to do is I want to enable 2 providers. To make life simple on me, I enabled 2 different providers. One that allows me to log in anonymously, and another one that's going to use a OAuth client credential grant. Okay, so it's going to use API keys. All right, and what you do when you create a API key is you definitely have to save that off, and that's a very common thing in MongoDB Atlas with security credentials. Is you basically get create and delete capabilities. So when you create a credential, you have to save it off, or you have to delete it and create a new one if you forgot. So I definitely made sure I created mine. And what I want to do is very quickly show you one example of using Stitch. And what I did in here was I used our GraphQL capability. So down here, what I did was, as you remember, we were querying our Influx database. So what I've added the ability to do here is query Influx, and this is just going to pretty much go out here and get everything, right? So it's going to go query the database and pull back this sample record. Now, what is cool about GraphQL is that I can drill down and get very selective with things. So in this particular case, I want to go out to the year 2010, and I only want to select countries from USA. Now, what I don't care about is, let's delete some of this information. So I can sit out here and I can create a schema from my database. Click this, and then I can take a look at a subset of the information. Now this is all well and good if you have GraphQL. Okay, so you can create a query, a schema. You can download your schema, and then here, what we give you up here is a URL that you can query with. Okay. Now what I did was in your distribution, I added the ability to query this over REST. So in order to use the REST capability, where is my collection? You can see I've been thinking too much about this COVID stuff. Let's see. We have to create an API key first. Okay. So with getting the OAuth client credential grant, we get an access token and a refresh token. And what we're going to do is these are bearer tokens that are going to go into an authorization header. And what this will allow me to do is query my database now. And you can see that I tested this. Okay, come on. Where's the little, where is this thing? I tested this earlier to make sure that this was working. So I got it unauthorized. So now that I pasted in my new bearer token, I'll be able to query this data and provide the information back that I want. Now, the way I set this schema up, I set the schema up to query the whole database, okay? Now, if I want to, I can change this, okay? I was using the same query. I don't have to look at all of this information. Like, for example, who cares about the countries and the runtime? I just want to see the title, the year, and how long the movie is. So in this particular case, I can use my API in this manner. Now, one thing I want to tell you guys, I'm probably only going to leave this out there for a couple of days. I don't think anybody's going to DDoS me on this, but I'm not going to leave this out there for forever. So I'll definitely give you through the weekend to go play with this, but I probably will take it down next week, just in terms of this application. So but everything you need to access this is in GitHub. So yeah, I'm not too worried about somebody DDoSing us on a sample influx database. The other thing to know is if you try to do this real late at night, we pause our clusters. So if it doesn't work at night but works during the day, you're not going crazy. We pause the clusters and just to kind of save money internally. So that's something I don't have control over. Just like tonight, I had to make sure my cluster wouldn't shut down during our talk. All right, so let's move on very quickly. We're running out of time. Let's see. Let's exit this. Terminal window. Your directory won't look this ugly. I can start my Stitch application. Yes. All right, so let's do this. I am going to bring this up in Safari. Okay, so as you can see here, what I'm doing is I'm using React as a front end to I like Alfred Hitchcock. So we can query any of the movies. So we have the ability to do this, and what I'd like to very quickly do is get into my source code, take a look at how we display the information coming back from the database in React. Okay. Vijay, this is your JavaScriptLA that I hijacked. And then.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah. And pretty much here, this is how we initialize Stitch. This is with the anonymous access. We access our database. the application ID is created in Stitch. It's in this particular case, it's the JSLA, and then it appended these random characters down here, and it pretty much fired up Apollo and loaded up our application for us that allows us to query the database. Oh, okay, yeah. All right, we're down to a minute left. Do you guys want to stay longer, or do you want to go to breakout rooms and just chat right now, do some socializing? Your call, Vijay.
I think, yeah, just if people want to like type in the chat what their status is, maybe like a yay, let's go to break, or you just want to hear more.
That's a valid question. Okay, what I was going to show is I had another API that's using the JavaScript SDK. I was just going to show the, okay, hear more. Got one hear more. Okay, so let me go on for just let me take 5 more minutes, and then we can jump into the groups. So let me just show you a little bit about our driver. In this particular case, what I did was create a very simple CRUD API that just added some nodes to a database. You'll see here what I've got here is a post, a read, an update, and a delete. And in all cases, the database collection, I'll show you how that's initialized at the top. But then we specify the collection and then the particular transaction that we are executing. And in this particular case, I'm inserting a note into this database. And then obviously reporting any of the errors, then handling, and then returning in the response, if there was an error, what that was. So in all cases, I'm doing the exact same thing with the difference of the operation. So on the post, doing an insert. On the read, I'm doing a find one. I could do just a find, but find one just gets a single record. So we don't have to deal with cursor management. I was just keeping it simple. In this particular case, the update, which would be the put, is going to this is basically doing an update everything, okay? I wasn't doing anything fancy with sets or any of those, but there's an awful lot of capabilities that we can bring to bear with update. We have update one, we have update many. So there's a lot of power in our update capabilities. The same goes with delete. In this case, I was very simply deleting this. So let me get to the actual function that kicks things off. I did not put my password out there for everybody. In the other database, there's a bunch of XXXs. So in this particular case, the way I initialize this is that I get a handle to my database, and then I pass that handle down to my route handler, and then listen on the port for connections. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this. I am not going to save this. So stop that. And do it here. And okay, so I'm listening port 8000. Now, what I've done here is you guys have samples of these. Let me get the right one. What do I call this? Here it is. So what I have here is, it's called JSLA, MongoDB JavaScript Server Test. And what, let me just get rid of, don't save, don't save, don't save, don't save. Okay. So I have the ability to create a note. And what I'm doing in this particular case is I'm passing in a document. So let's just put relational databases and put MySQL. So in this particular case, you know, I can use my API to add to the database. And if we go over here to our routes, we can see that the insert route was called on post and inserted into the node collection. So we can come over here to our database. You guys now have multiple ways to get to this. You have Visual Studio Code, you have MongoDB Compass, you have Atlas, and you have Mongo Shell. So you have many different ways to get at this information. And you can see that we went to our Note API database, and you can see information in here, mostly that document databases, but I just added this value about relational databases. So I'll let you guys, I don't want to take up your evening. I have the full CRUD capability out there in code. The only thing that you're going to have to change about this is, let me not put my credentials out here for the world to see, is you're going to have your username and your password out here that you'll add. And where you're going to get this is here. So you're going to come back here to your cluster, and you're going to come over here to connect, and you're going to say connect my application. And in this particular case, you're going to take this URI right here. And that's going to be the string that you're going to put into your code. Now, as you're creating these, it's not a bad idea to include the full driver code. Okay. So don't forget to include that. And then you just come back to your code and paste that in, and you're good to go, right? The one thing I did want to point out here is that you definitely want to use SSL to keep your data secure. You definitely, I mean, the Compass will give you the name of your replica set. You pretty much, as a practice, will always put your credentials in the admin database, but that can change if you need to. But once you get deeper into Mongo and learn about that, it's not like super secret. You can change databases. But what is important from the standpoint of applications is the ability to implement retriable rights. Retriable rights, if something happens to the write, it will retry it automatically without having to go into your code. The write majority, what this does, remember when we were looking at our replica set, where we had our primary, our secondary, and our secondary? What this says is that this write, I want to not only commit to my primary, but a majority of my secondaries. So that means that this write will get acknowledged after the write has been written to the primary and one secondary. You can change these in Mongo. You can have a majority of 0, which is basically a fire and forget. A write 1, which is just the primary. Write majority is typically a primary and secondary. And then if you have a large replica set with maybe 5 secondaries, you could do, like, say, maybe write 4, something along those lines. You can also add tags to this as well. I can get into that with you one-on-one later. But so what I want to do is go back and finish the last part of the presentation, and then we're going to call it a night. It'll be up to Vijay if you guys want to do some networking. I showed the links to the GraphQL resources. They're in the PDF in the GitHub repo. JavaScript resources, our driver, our NPM package reference. And what's important is the driver compatibility. So as you're using different versions of Mongo, you definitely want to do a MongoD -- version to see the version of the daemon that you're using, and then make sure that you're choosing the driver that's compatible with that version of MongoDB. Couple things I just wanted to share with you before we call it a night. We have a great resource for developers at our MongoDB developer portal. So there's tons of stuff out here from, you know, when I created this screenshot, you know, this had the Johns Hopkins COVID data that we have out there, GraphQL, MongoDB and C#. So there's a lot of resources out there. This is a great place to dig in and start learning about Mongo and what's available for you as developers. In MongoDB University, we opened this up to everybody during the COVID stay-at-home party that we've all been having for the last couple of months. So this is a great place to come out here and get coached up on MongoDB. I would say before you take this class, take the M001 class. It's just an intro to everything Mongo. Great class. There's feature classes for different versions of MongoDB, but most probably of interest to you all is the JavaScript developers class. Now, coming up June 9th and 10th, you'll see that there's a link in the PDF to register for MongoDB Live. This is a 2-day virtual event that will be held online. So I encourage all of you to register for this. It's free, doesn't cost anything, and you'll make a lot of good acquaintances there and some of the networking opportunities we'll have. A good friend of mine, Joe Carlson, he's one of our developer advocates. He is going to be talking about how to build your first GraphQL client in JavaScript. You guys have a head start. You've got some code of a JavaScript client, and it wouldn't surprise me that Joe is going to use our Influx data. And then finally, this gentleman from Palo Alto Networks, I know they have a very aggressive Mongo installation up there. So this would be a good talk as well. So I want to thank everybody for coming, and I hope this information is of assistance. Feel free to send me a LinkedIn, and I'll definitely join my network. We can certainly chat and send messages there. And once again, thanks a lot. Vijay, I'll turn this back to you, bro.